Hiya all my Ali Pallies, and thank you for joining me today. Now today is going to be a bit of a busy day on Ali M's Beauty because I did promise all of you on Monday that I was going to do my walk of shame first impression yesterday, which was Wednesday, and I was going to change my live to 1 o'clock today. And then of course walk of shame didn't arrive, and I got back from Foot Health and I did a late live, which meant that some people missed me. So I'm going to do another live today at 1 o'clock. Okay, but first of all, what I thought I'd structure it this way, okay? So I now have my Walk of Shame eyeshadow palette. It actually arrived yesterday. So big apologies to Charlotte Tilbury, nothing to do with them. It was that the delivery company just didn't notify me that it was on its way. So I assumed because it was late to dispatch that it wasn't going to come that day. So apologies to Charlotte Tilbury for that. They did keep to their promise of next day. So it came later after I did my live. So what I'm going to do is, this is how I'm going to plan it. This morning, I'm going to post this review, and it's going to do all the comparisons because I've been swatching away, and then come back and join me on the live, and then I will apply the makeup on my live. And for those of you that don't want to sit through a live just to see what it looks like on, I'll put a timestamp on the end. So I hope all that's clear, right? So comparisons this morning on a non-live, and then I'm going to apply it on the live, and I'll put a timestamp for those of you that just want to see the application. All right, so let's get going. Okay, so everything's the same as our other quads, same amounts, same packaging, and let me just show you what the palette looks like. So this is Walk of Shame. Okay, so Prime, Enhance, Smoke, Pop. Very red toned, as you can see, and I think I got quite close to doing it yesterday when I did my dupe, but I'm going to talk a bit more about that in the live. So I know a lot of you have been wanting to find out about comparisons with other palettes. Now, before I start, I just wanted to quickly say that, you know, for collectors like me that have got every one of Charlotte's palettes, there are bound to be some similarities with previous palettes. It's not a criticism of Charlotte Tilbury. You know, I've got all of them. There are bound to be similar shades. That doesn't necessarily mean, you know, it's bad. But the reason that I'm doing this is to basically, if you've got a palette and I say, well, this shade is similar and that's the only shade you're going for, then it'll give you the information to decide for yourself whether or not you want to go for this palette. Okay, so I've gone through all my palettes, and let's start. I'm going to go through it by shade, and I'm going to go through each shade and tell you if I found similar shades. Okay, so we're going to talk about the prime shade. Now, to be honest, unless Charlotte introduces a blue palette with blue hued prime shades, it's going to be quite likely that the prime shades are going to be similar to other prime shades. There are only so many shades of prime that you can do, I think. So I'm just going to swatch you first the prime shade of Walk of Shame. So here we have the prime shade. Okay, so the prime shade for me looked identical really to Dreamgasm, which is here, and Pillow Talk, which we know that Pillow Talk and Dreamgasm were the same prime shades anyway. Okay. It's also similar to, but not exactly the same. It's similar to Exaggereyes Enhanced Shade. And I just need to find that 1 second. Okay, so this is Exaggereyes Enhanced Shade. Slightly darker, but quite similar. Okay, so that is the prime shade. So Dreamgasm and Pillow Talk basically are the same prime shade. All right, so moving on next to the enhanced shade. Okay, so the enhanced shade. I found quite a few shades that were similar to this. So let me first of all swatch you the enhanced shade of Walk of Shame. Okay, that's the enhanced shade. Now, the closest match that I found to this shade was the second shade, which is called the Multi-Glow of Lovegasm, which is here. So I'm just going to swatch you that next to it. To me, it was almost identical, perhaps a little bit more glow to it. And maybe not as much red as I'm looking at it now. Okay, so that's the Multi-Glow of Lovegasm. And then the other similar shades that I found were the prime shade of Happy Eyes in Stars in Their Eyes palette, which is here. So I'm just going to give you the prime shade of Happy Eyes from Stars in Your Eyes palette. Again, very similar, but I think perhaps just more shimmery. Okay. And the other one was, oh yeah, the other one wasn't really the same, but it was similar. And I'm just going to explain. There were two more actually, just hold on. Right, the other shade it was similar to was this one, which is in the Icon palette. So second row, middle shadow. And I will swatch that here. Very similar. And there is a last one which is kind of similar to, but not quite the same. Okay, this one's for information. So the other one that was similar to, but not quite the same, is the pop shade of Transformeyes. But the pop shade of Transformeyes is matte. But I think you can see that it's kind of a matte version. Very similar, perhaps a little bit brownier. Okay. So that is the enhanced shade. So let's move on to the smoke shade. Okay, this one's going to be a very short section because I couldn't find anything that was similar to the smoke shade of Walk of Shame. Let me just show you the smoke shade. It's got a lot of red in it. And this is what it looks like here. And I couldn't find anything at all that has ever been brought out that is anywhere near this. Someone may prove me wrong and come up with a suggestion on another channel, but I have swatched and swatched and swatched and there is nothing similar. Okay, so it's all the other shadows are similar ones, but they've got a lot more brown in them. This is almost red. It's just a beautiful shade actually. Okay, so that is the smoke shade of Walk of Shame. Let's move on to the pop. Okay, so let me first show you the pop shade of Walk of Shame. Now, I found two pop shades that are almost identical, if not the same. Probably the same, to be honest. The first one is Pillow Talk. Let me just swatch that for you. looks the same to me. And then the next one is the Palette of Pops Supersonic Girl, which was a kind of limited edition palette of pops that came out last October. And it's the Prime Pop from the Palette of Pops. Possibly slightly darker, but you know, once that's on your eyes, you're really not going to notice if it is slightly darker. They're going to look the same. I don't think it is actually, it's just the light. So you can see they're all identical. So that is Walk of Shame, that's Pillow Talk, and that is Supersonic Girl Palette of Pops. All right, so those are the comparisons, and I've been through every single palette in my collection, including the instant looking palettes. There wasn't really anything that compared to Walk of Shame in the instant looking palette. Okay, I nearly forgot one last comparison. Now, there is a very, very close comparison to this palette, but it hasn't been released yet. And you're thinking, hang on a minute. How do you know that then? Because it has been released in the US, and it was a limited edition in the Nordstrom sale, and it's called the Travel Size Smoky Eye Palette. And I want to give a massive thanks to Shoshana for sending me the picture and the swatches through, which I am going to post here. You will see that I think 4 of the shades are just identical. Let me just check, and I'm going to tell you exactly which are which. Okay, apologies, it's actually 3 shades. Now, this is a picture that Shoshana sent me. Again, many thanks, Shoshana. The prime shade to me looks identical to the prime shade in the Walk of Shame palette. The enhanced shade looks identical to the 4th one along. Yeah, the 4th one along from the left looks very, very similar. And again, I'm not so sure, but we're going to have a look in a minute. Here we go. We're looking at the swatches now that Shoshana kindly swatched for me. And I think the smoke shade in the Walk of Shame palette is either the 3rd one here that you see or the 5th one here that you see. They're both got quite reddish undertones. So there are 3. Obviously, there is no pop shade in this palette, but it is going to be very similar, and it is likely to be released in the UK soon. Okay, so to my final conclusion, who is this for? Should you buy it? Now, you know, I've dissected every palette here. It's unbelievable. I'm just palettes piled around me. And as I said, I'm a collector, and I've collected all her palettes. And, you know, it's easy to pull them all apart and say, oh, well, it's similar to this and similar to that. But the reality is when you're getting ready to go out at the beginning of the day, you are not going to be pulling apart 6 palettes to match up a shade. It's all about the overall experience of a palette. And for example, Dreamgasm, even though there were 2 repeated shades, I absolutely love the colour mix of Dreamgasm, and I didn't mind when I heard that there were 2 duplicate shades, even though I told you about it in case you were, you know, information is power in terms of buying. I still think it was worth it because the shade mix was beautiful, and I think the reality is that we pull out 1 palette in the morning, most of us, unless we are heavily, you know, makeup artists or we're a beauty blogger or whatever. We pull out 1 palette to do our makeup. We don't want to be pulling out 3 or 4. So I think whether it matches this shade, whether it matches that shade, becomes a little bit irrelevant. And I think what I love about this is I've swatched the palette for you here. So you've got the Prime, Enhance, Smoke, Pop. Then you've got Walk of Shame lip liner. You've got Walk of Shame lipstick. You've got a perfectly put together face. And if you love Walk of Shame, then I think you need this palette, because you've then got a whole look. You've got a whole look except for the blush. Now, I'd have swatched a couple of blushes here that I think will go. I think if you're fair-skinned, then First Love would go with this look. And if you're darker skinned, I think the Climax would go. The blushes never swatch very well on your arm. I've found that before when I've been doing it, but I would definitely think those two would go. However, Charlotte is always about symmetry whenever she brings out new products. And when she brought out the Pillow Talk look, she brought out a cheek to chic. So is she going to bring out a Walk of Shame cheek to chic? Who knows? To me, I'd be very surprised if she doesn't, because as I've said in the past, there's always a symmetry to what she brings out in terms of what it goes with. And I just can't imagine her not doing that. But in the meantime, definitely First Love or the Climax blush if you're darker skinned. Either one would work very well. Or First Love for the day, because I love First Love, even though I'm darker skinned. It's very natural, lovely look. And then the Climax blush, you know, if you want a bit more of an evening look maybe. But you've got a look, a perfectly put together look. And I think that is what makes this so much, so useful, I should say, is that you've got another one of her iconic shades, Walk of Shame, in a whole look now that you can put together. And I just think that they're beautiful autumnal shades, and it's just been put together really perfectly. So I would say definitely buy it. If you're a beauty blogger or a makeup artist, then decide for yourself whether or not the colour comparisons make it worth your while. I think you'd still buy it anyway. But I think you've got a perfectly put together look, and certainly for autumn, I'm going to be wearing that a lot. And I don't regret buying it at all. So if you want to join me live later on, I'll be on at 1 o'clock. If I'm slightly late, please forgive me, because I'm now going to be dashing off to the post office and uploading this video. So I've got to get a move on. So yeah, join me at 1 o'clock. I'm going to put this on. I'm going to timestamp the application so that anybody that doesn't want to sit through us all chatting doesn't have to sit through us all chatting. And I'm sure there was something else I wanted to say about this palette, but I can't think of it right now. So maybe I'll remember on the live. Okay, see you all soon. Take care, and see you at 1 o'clock. Bye-bye.